Ladies and gentlemen, how are we doing? My name is Ryan. Welcome to the channel. We are in the midst of January, and another NFL regular season has come and gone. While some of our teams battle for a Super Bowl berth, others are left to reflect on the past and cling to the promises of the future. Today we're talking about the Panthers, and we're going to do a little bit of both. Let's get into it. A new season brings promises of prosperity and progress. Regardless of your team's prior shortcomings, we start the new season with hope. A clean slate, a new year. Fresh off one of the more miserable seasons in team history, the Panthers entered the 24-25 season with a new coach, Dave Canales. A first-time head coach, Canales had put himself on the radar with his reputation as a QB guru, playing a part in the resurgence of Geno Smith in Seattle and Baker Mayfield in Tampa. It's no secret that Bryce Young struggled throughout his rookie year. Fans and ownership alike hoped that the Canales hire would help turn things around. Along with the QB-friendly hire, management spent the offseason bolstering the offensive line that had struggled so much throughout Bryce's rookie campaign. Panthers GM Dan Morgan signed Robert Hunt to a 5-year, $100 million contract, and Damian Lewis to a 4-year, $53 million contract. The front office also looked to give Bryce Young some more receiving weapons, trading for Deontay Johnson and then drafting Gamecock wideout Xavier Legette with the 32nd pick in the NFL draft. Despite the team's struggles under Bryce's leadership in his rookie season, the organization was committed to improving the team around him so that Bryce would have a real opportunity to showcase his talents. Excitement continued to grow in the Carolinas as Week 1 drew closer. After a 2-15 season where the Panthers didn't own the rights to their first-round pick, fans were ready to put that season in the past. No way this year could get any worse, right? Immediately, the defense lets Derek Carr throw the easiest 60-yard bomb of his life, and then on the first offensive snap of the season, safe run, maybe get rid of the nerves? No. Interception!
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
To start the season, it seemed like the Panthers were completely outmatched on both sides of the ball. Somehow, Derek Carr looked like prime Aaron Rodgers, and Bryce Young was throwing dots to the other team. Week 2 would be no better. Herbert and Harbaugh made the long trip from California to Charlotte and immediately filled the air with the stench of Panthers pack. Bryce Young forgot which team to throw to again, and the Panthers were getting booed before halftime of the home opener. Bryce finished the game with 84 passing yards, and the Panthers had been outscored 73-13 through the first 2 games. It seemed that there was some uncertainty regarding Young's future in Carolina. However, rookie head coach Dave Canales backed Bryce after the game, stating that he was their guy going forward. The very next day, Bryce Young was benched. After 2 rough games to start Bryce's second season, it was clear that something wasn't clicking and that a change needed to be made. Canales told the press that after watching the Chargers game tape, he believed Andy Dalton gave the Panthers the best shot at winning games. And he was right. The next week, the Panthers made the long journey from Charlotte to Las Vegas and looked like a new football team. After only scoring 13 points through the first 2 weeks combined, the Panthers dropped 36 on the Raiders, with Andy Dalton throwing for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Andy's performance was refreshing, and Panthers fans were happy to get a win. But while the Red Rocket had garnered applause, more questions were starting to be asked about Bryce. The same team that had struggled so much with Bryce under center flourished immediately under the leadership of Andy Dalton. There was some uncertainty regarding Young's future in Carolina. Despite his small stature in comparison to the traditional quarterback build, Bryce Young had displayed all the tools needed from a signal caller during his time at Alabama. His accuracy was elite, throwing the ball with anticipation and into seemingly non-existent windows at times. He moved well in and out of the pocket and often showed the ability to take hits and even break tackles from time to time. We saw these traits displayed at times throughout Bryce's rookie campaign, but the good moments were definitely overshadowed by the bad, and former head coach Frank Reich was fired only 8 games into his tenure with the Panthers. Reich had helped orchestrate the trade that landed Bryce Young in Carolina, and he was fired shortly after. Now 2 games into his sophomore campaign, Bryce was being benched by the Panthers' new head coach, Dave Canales. Although the Panthers denied trade rumors, many analysts around the league believed there was a real chance Canales and the Panthers were looking to move on from Bryce Young. The Panthers started off Week 4 hot. Chuba Hubbard took a handoff up the middle for a 40-yard touchdown, and it seemed like the Panthers were building a little momentum. Then Caleb Williams came out and connected with former Panther DJ Moore for a 35-yard touchdown. The Panthers' offense was stagnant for the rest of the game, only being able to muster 3 more points through the ensuing 3 quarters. Meanwhile, Caleb Williams threw for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, both touchdown passes being caught by who other than DJ Moore. This was rock bottom for Panthers fans. The quarterback we traded an arm and a leg for was sitting on the bench while the defense was getting absolutely torched by our former wide receiver 1 and the generational quarterback prospect that the Bears selected with our pick Bryce would eventually come in and lead a rather successful drive in garbage time, but failed to capitalize in the red zone. After the game, Bryce was questioned about how he was dealing with his new role on the sidelines. He emphasized that he just wanted to help the team and stated that he was staying locked in while off the field, taking advantage of mental reps. Despite Bryce Young showing promise with his limited opportunity off the bench, Andy would remain the starter for a few more weeks. In Week 6, the Panthers got smoked at home by Bijan and the Falcons, setting up a Week 7 matchup with the 4-2 Washington Commanders led by rookie standout quarterback Jaden Daniels. Unfortunately, Jaden Daniels would leave in the first quarter with a rib injury, and then Marcus Mariota came in and put on an absolute clinic against the Panthers defense. Final score 40-7. The Panthers had given up 78 points in the last 2 weeks, and their first overall pick was on the bench getting Jamarcus Russell comparisons.
Okay, we looking at Bryce Young right now. Jamarcus Russell wasn't even that bad.
Following the blowout loss to the Commanders, many wondered if Bryce would be named the starting quarterback going forward. The day after the loss, Coach Canales addressed the press and stated that Andy would keep his job for another week. The next day, Andy Dalton was driving on Sardis Road in Charlotte and was involved in a car accident. Luckily, Andy and his family were okay and no serious injuries were reported at the scene. However, after being evaluated by the team's medical staff, it was reported that Andy had suffered a sprained thumb in his throwing hand during the crash. Bryce Young was named the starter for the Panthers' Week 8 showdown with the Broncos in Denver. I include this because it's part of the story, but I mean no disrespect to Andy. As a fan, I'm grateful for what he's done for our organization. By luck, or by fate, Bryce was named the starting quarterback for the Panthers again. He was presented with another opportunity and eager to prove he belonged in the National Football League. How would he respond? Bryce's first game back under center came against a Denver team that was starting to put it together. After starting the season 0-2 with rookie Bo Nix under center, the Broncos had won 4 of their last 5 and were looking to utilize their home field advantage against the reeling Panthers. The Panthers took an early lead after the defense got an uncharacteristic stop that was followed by a successful Panthers drive, capped off with a Bryce Young touchdown pass to rookie wideout Xavier Legette. X tallied his 3rd score on the year, but this was the first time he'd caught a touchdown pass from Bryce. The Panthers started the game off with some complimentary football and looked primed to play spoiler to Nix and the Broncos. Sean Payton had something up his sleeve though, and the Broncos rattled off 21 unanswered points in the second quarter, earning themselves a 2-possession lead to end the half. The Panthers defense would hold the Broncos to 7 points in the second half, but the offense failed to bring any comeback attempts to life. Bryce would throw 2 second-half interceptions before leading a 98-yard drive that was capped off with a Jalen Coker touchdown with 18 seconds left. Despite the 2 interceptions, there were plenty of positive things to take away from Bryce's first game back under center. There were a lot of good throws we didn't see through the first 2 weeks, and Bryce's bond with Jalen Coker and Xavier Legette seemed to be growing. Coming into the game, the Broncos boasted a top 5 passing defense in the league, and the Panthers offense was missing Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson. The next week, the Panthers announced that despite being a full participant in practice, Andy Dalton was continuing to rehab his thumb injury. Bryce Young would remain the starter for another week. Week 9, and the Saints were making the trip to Charlotte. Last time Bryce faced off against the Saints, it was a massacre. Not this time though. Bryce and the Panthers did just enough to get revenge over Derek Carr and the Saints. Young threw for 171 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Those numbers don't jump off the stat sheet, but the sophomore signal caller showed that he could lead the team to victory over a divisional opponent, displaying his clutch gene while leading a game-winning drive that was capped off with a Chuba touchdown. Bryce had gotten his get back against the Saints and delivered a win to Panthers fans at the bank. Coach Canales also liked what he saw from Bryce, particularly late in the game, stating he did a fantastic job of finishing that game the right way, finding a way to win and really battling that way. Bryce's confidence was starting to grow, and it seemed like he was starting to win back the trust of those around him. The next week, the Panthers were slated to head to Munich and square off against the Giants. Bryce Young would be named the starter again. Playing in front of Germany's Panther faithful, Bryce wasted no time getting the offense rolling, throwing an early touchdown pass to rookie tight end Jatavion Sanders, his first career touchdown. For the second week in a row, Bryce Young's stat line was average at best, but the Panthers were able to hold on and secure a win. Chuba Hubbard continued to impress, rushing for 153 yards with a touchdown, and Bryce Young took care of the football, throwing for 126 yards with a touchdown. Eddie walked the game off with a 36-yard field goal in overtime, and the Panthers were headed into their bye week on a 2-game win streak. The defense played well during the stretch, holding the Saints to 22 and forcing 3 turnovers against the Giants, allowing the Panthers to stick with the run game and dominate possession. Although our draft capital continued to evaporate with each win, it was a relief to see the Panthers put together consecutive wins with Bryce at the helm. Riding the momentum from their newfound success under the leadership of Bryce Young, the Panthers headed back to Charlotte to enjoy their bye week, with the Chiefs, Bucks, and Eagles scheduled right after. Despite playing well over the last few weeks, I don't think anybody really expected the Panthers to compete with the one-loss Chiefs in Week 12. The Chiefs came into the game as 10.5-point favorites on the road. Early on in the game, it looked like the spread might have been a lock. Patty was dialed early, and the Chiefs were in the end zone before the 13-minute mark in the first. Bryce and the Panthers managed to answer with back-to-back field goals before the Chiefs got one of their own, making the score 13-6. The Panthers were holding their own against the back-to-back reigning champs, but shortly before halftime, Patty threw his second touchdown of the game, giving the Chiefs a 14-point lead with 40 seconds left in the half. This was a crucial moment in the game, and the Chiefs looked poised to blow the game open. The Panthers wouldn't lie down, though. Bryce strung together a few impressive passes, leading the Panthers down the field and setting up Eddie to knock down a field goal as time expired in the half. This gave the Panther offense some momentum, which seemed to carry over to the third quarter, where the Panthers would continue to be resilient, putting together a long drive that resulted in David Moore being on the receiving end of a Bryce Young touchdown pass. Unfortunately, Patty would answer immediately, putting the Panthers down by 2 possessions, but the defense would make multiple key stops throughout the rest of the game, allowing Bryce and the offense to slowly crawl their way back. Eddie knocked down another field goal to start the fourth, followed by 2 huge defensive stops. Panthers ball, just over 3 minutes left. Bryce Young has a chance to lead his team down the field and tie the game against the Chiefs. And he'd do just that. The Panthers, led by their field general, marched down the field and punched the ball into the end zone with Chuba, completing the ensuing 2-point conversion to tie the game. A few weeks ago, we were unsure if Bryce Young would ever start at quarterback for the Panthers again. Now, Bryce was starting to look like an NFL quarterback and was on the brink of completing one of the biggest upsets of the NFL season. Sadly, the defense couldn't withstand Patty's heroics, and the Chiefs wound up kicking a game-winning field goal. But as a Panthers fan, this game was a massive moral victory. And we all know moral victories only get you so far in professional sports, but the Panthers' growth was very encouraging, and their progression seemed evident, especially over the last few weeks. At the start of the season, the Panthers were getting curb stomped by below-average teams, and with so much uncertainty at the quarterback position, it seemed as if the team lacked direction, which was very discouraging as a fan. Now it was starting to seem like the Panthers had something they could build on going forward. Bryce finished the Chiefs game with 263 yards and a touchdown, and I don't think there was any question about who would start for the Panthers at quarterback the next week. The squad now had their eyes set on a Week 13 divisional matchup with the Bucs. Following the heartbreaking loss to the Chiefs, the Panthers were looking to bounce back and add another tally to the win column, but Baker and the Bucs weren't going to make things easy. Mike Evans gave the Bucs an early lead with an unbelievable catch, but the defense would play well for the rest of the half, holding the Bucs to only 10 points. Bryce and the offense put together a solid half. BY9 ran one in, and the Panthers put up 13, while also getting absolutely robbed of an additional passing touchdown. The Panthers held a 3-point lead headed into the half, and continued to show that despite their losing record, they were going to keep playing their game, attempting to get a little bit better each week. The squad was playing with a ferocity that had seemingly been absent for the last few seasons. Fans were also getting a first glimpse at second-round draft pick Jonathan Brooks, who had missed most of the season recovering from an ACL tear that occurred during his time at the University of Texas. The Panthers had an opportunity to take a 10-point lead shortly before the start of the fourth, but failed to capitalize in the red zone, settling for 3 instead. Baker and the Bucs would respond with 2 straight scoring drives, giving them a 20-16 lead with just over 3 minutes left in the game. Another week, another opportunity for Bryce Young to lead a game-winning drive. And again, when it meant the most, he delivered. Bryce led the squad down the field, showcasing his passing abilities the entire way down before delivering a 35-yard dot on the run into Adam Thielen's breadbasket. This was one of the best moments of the season for Panthers fans, and unfortunately, it would be short-lived. The Panthers held the lead for all of 30 seconds before Baker led the Bucs into field goal range, and the Bucs kicker drilled the game-tying kick as time expired, sending the game into overtime. The Bucs got the ball to start OT, and the Panthers defense did their job, forcing the Bucs to settle for a long field goal, which was missed. Then Adam Thielen made one of the most clutch plays of the season, reeling in an insane one-handed catch on 3rd down, putting the Panthers into field goal range. A few runs to try to get a little closer, and then Eddie could attempt the game-winning field goal. But the very next play, Chuba fumbled the ball, and the defense recovered. Hubbard had been rock solid for the Panthers until then, and there's no guarantee the field goal would have gone in. But the air was absolutely sucked from the lungs of every Panthers fan in that moment. The Bucs would go on to kick the game-winning field goal, final score 26-23. As a fan, it's hard to remain optimistic after a heartbreaker against a division rival, but the Panthers had fought hard and were in a position to win the game up until the end. And honestly, at this point in the season, I was fine with moral victories. With each loss, the Panthers were itching their way back towards a top draft pick, which could be used to give Bryce more weapons or address one of the many needs on the defensive side of the ball. Regardless, it was time for the Panthers to get ready for the next week, where they were due to face off against the Eagles in Philly. The last few weeks had been a gauntlet, and this matchup wasn't going to be any easier. But Bryce Young and the Panthers refused to back down. With a 3-9 record, the boys didn't have much to play for other than pride, but they continued to compete, and they found themselves in another close matchup with the 9-2 Eagles, who had won their last 8 games and looked poised to compete for an NFC championship. The league worst Panther run defense did not match up well on paper against Saquon and the Eagles, but the Panthers defense put on a gutsy performance, limiting the explosive Eagle offense to only 22 points in 4 quarters. Bryce showed flashes in the first half, but also fell victim to the Eagles' menacing defense, throwing an interception late in the second quarter. But thanks to some scrappy offense and some timely defensive stops, the Panthers were able to keep it close. Cue the fourth quarter. 3rd and 11 from their own 2-yard line, down by 8, just over 3 minutes left. It's do or die for the Panthers. Bryce takes the snap, maneuvers the pocket, steps up to avoid the pressure, breaks a sack, and then throws a teardrop 30 yards downfield to XL for a first down. Fourth quarter, Bryce is back. Bryce and David Moore would connect over the middle for a first down pass just before the 2-minute warning. And then on 4th and 7, Bryce went to Mr. Reliable and brought the Panthers closer to the red zone. With 50 seconds to go, the Eagles sent heat and Xavier Legette got free over top. Bryce let it fly, and for a few moments, Panthers fans rejoiced in unison. That universal joy was abruptly interrupted by the absence of air in the lungs once the replay was shown. For the second time in as many weeks, Panthers fans had their souls crushed, while the rest of the league watched and laughed. Or
just win, please just win. Like, nothing was going right for the Eagles. I'm like, this is it. Like, Panthers about to do it. And y'all niggas.
Nah, it ain't y'all, man. It was me, man.
I'm playing. You stupid as fuck.
All things considered, it was a respectable performance. However, the ending was undeniably deflating for fans and seemingly for the players too. The boys came out flat at home the next week and got pounced by the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys. The run defense conceded 149 rushing yards to Asheville native Rico Dowdle, and the 30-14 loss would be the Panthers' 4th straight. Whatever momentum the Panthers had built during Bryce's first few games back under center was dissipating, and with only 3 games left in the season, Bryce was still looking to solidify his job as the starter. Week 16 was on the horizon, with the Panthers set to face off against the Cardinals in Charlotte. Kyler and the Cardinals were in the midst of an up-and-down season and were looking to keep their playoff hopes alive with a win against the Panthers. Neither team was able to create much separation throughout regulation, and despite facing a 10-point fourth-quarter deficit, Kyler was able to will the Cardinals back in the game, leading them down the field and setting up a long field goal attempt to force overtime. Of course, they drilled it, and the Panthers were headed to overtime again. The offense got the ball first and stalled. All the Cardinals needed was a field goal to win. But, to the surprise of most Panther fans, the defense held, giving the offense another shot, and they capitalized this time. Chuba redeemed himself, looking like a man on a mission in overtime, willing his way into the end zone and securing the Panthers their 4th win of the season, doubling last year's tally. Chuba finished the game with 152 yards and 2 touchdowns, continuing his excellent season. Bryce's stats were mediocre again, throwing for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he took care of the football and delivered another victory to the fans. 2 weeks left, 2 more opportunities for the Panthers to show growth, and for Bryce to prove to everyone in Carolina that he was indeed a franchise quarterback. We're not going to spend too much time talking about Week 17 because it was pretty awful for the Panthers. Bryce didn't necessarily play bad, throwing for just over 200 yards with 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, but the defense got dog-walked, and Baker threw for 5 touchdowns. I remember watching this game, and as a fan, it's never good watching a divisional opponent put up 48 on your team, but I was also playing against Baker Mayfield in a fantasy championship. This dude, Baker, just kept throwing dots, and our defense looked helpless. I actually wanted to pull my hair out. This defense was historically bad throughout the season, allowing more points than any other team in NFL history, and Week 17 was a perfect representation of that. Baker finished the game with as many touchdowns as incompletions. 17 games into Bryce's sophomore campaign, and it seemed that he had probably done enough to keep his job for another season. But fans had yet to see a flagship performance from the former number 1 overall pick. That was all about to change in Week 18. With the Panthers' playoff hopes dashed, the squad made the short trip from Atlanta to Charlotte, looking to play spoiler. Led by their newly appointed starter, Michael Penix, the Falcons had won 2 of their last 3 and needed a Week 18 win along with the Buccaneers' loss to secure a playoff berth. The last time the Panthers played in Atlanta, it was Bryce Young's NFL debut, and the Falcons made easy work of the Panthers, intercepting Bryce twice along the way. But unfortunately for the Falcons, this wasn't the same Bryce Young. Through all the trials and tribulation, the ridicule and mockery, Bryce had never cracked, and he was about to show that he belonged in the NFL. In his final outing of his sophomore season, Bryce would throw for over 250 yards and account for 5 total touchdowns. Bryce looked cool, calm, and collected, utilizing his arms and his legs to scorch the Falcons' defense. This was the Bryce Young that we'd seen glimpses of throughout the last 2 seasons, and his perseverance was paying off on the field. On the other side of the ball, Michael Penix was doing his thing, and regulation wasn't enough to separate the 2 teams. The game went into overtime, and the Panthers got the ball first. Bryce's clutch gene was on full display for the final drive of the game, connecting with rookie standout Jalen Coker twice to bring the Panthers down to the 1-yard line. Miles punched it in, and the Panthers secured their 5th victory of the season. The Bryce Young narrative was starting to change, and it appeared that Panthers fans had something to look forward to. As a Panther fan, 2024 came with a fair amount of pain. Jonathan Brooks retore his ACL shortly after returning, Derek Brown missed most of the season with injury, and Xavier Legette looked pretty bad for most of the year. The first half of the season was cataclysmic, and with Bryce Young on the bench, it seemed like there was a real chance the Panthers might be forced into drafting another quarterback in the offseason. The reemergence of Bryce Young has given a demoralized Panthers fan base hope. If you guys made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you. It took a while for me to make this, so if you guys would like it, it would be much appreciated. Until next time, I'm out.